Hey mama, if you've ever felt nervous about having a C-section, or maybe you're still carrying some grief or guilt from your birth experience, this episode is for you, because today we're getting real about C-sections, not as a worst case scenario, but as a valid, powerful, and yes, beautiful way to bring your baby into the world. I'm sitting down with two incredible women, Jen Wagner, a trained OB anesthesiologist, and Bethany, a doula turned nurse and 3-time C-section mama. And together they host the C-Section Experience podcast. These women are flipping the narrative on surgical birth. And this conversation is honest, emotional, and packed with tips that every pregnant woman should hear, not just those planning a cesarean, because birth isn't about a plan. It's about your power, and you are the queen of your story, no matter how your baby arrives. So grab your tea, your notebook, or just hit play while you're folding that tiny little baby laundry, and let's dive in. Hello, mamas, and welcome back to the Birth Experience. Today, I am talking to two lovely ladies from the C-Section Experience, which is really funny because I'm the birth experience.
I know, you're going to point that out.
Yeah, so I've already done sort of an introduction, so I would love to have each of you guys introduce yourselves and tell us like your personal reason. Like I know how Labor Nurse Mama was born, but I would love to how each of you guys came to the C-Section Experience.
Want to start, Jen?
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Let me start.
Yeah. So I feel like our story, there's a combined portion of our story, and then there's obviously our individual aspects. So I think I'll tell our combined portion first, which is that, you know, we're really good friends. We're neighbors. I moved from New York City in 2020 during the pandemic. I was pregnant with my second child and put my 2-year-old in a preschool. And Bethany also had her 2-year-old in a preschool.
Yeah.
And so we met there, 5-6 years ago. And we have like so much in common. And she's been working in birth education for many years. And she was a nurse, she was a doula, and I do OB anesthesia. So I'm a fellowship trained OB anesthesiologist, which basically means I did an extra year after my anesthesia residency in training just how to take care of pregnant patients. So how we came to do the podcast, we were having all these conversations.
We'd leave parties and go sit on the front porch. And people would be like, where did they go?
Yeah.
Because we were busy having birth talks.
Yeah. So I always wanted to find a way to connect with patients, I guess, outside of the hospital, because I find, as an anesthesiologist, I don't get a lot of opportunities to have real long conversations. I sort of always have to abbreviate it. And also, I'm talking to women when they're in kind of a different state of mind, obviously, right? Like they're in the hospital, maybe they're, in labor, whatever it is. And I don't feel like they get the full picture of what I really want to explain to them. So I've always had that in the back of my mind for years. And so this is a way for me to kind of speak openly and say the things that I wish I could say to all of my patients if I had the time, if they actually saw an anesthesiologist before they came to the hospital, which, is a dream, but I don't think will ever happen.
Never happen.
Yeah. And so we chose to talk about C-sections in particular, because obviously that's a big part. It's not the only thing that I do as an OB anesthesiologist, but I do take care of a lot of women having C-sections every single time I go into the hospital. And so I sit with them. I talk to them all the time, who are having their C-section. So I think I understand what their pain points are, what they're worried about, what questions they come in with most often. And so we wanted to do something with that. And the easiest thing for us was to talk about it. So that's kind of, where we came to that. And we have these very different perspectives on everything, which I think is really helpful. Some people might relate more with Bethany on some things, and some people might relate more to me on some things. And to be able to share sort of both of our experiences and perspectives on different topics as we talk about them, I think is really helpful for people to hear too.
I mean, Jen loves stats, and I love to throw holistic measures at anything I possibly can. If there's lavender,
yes,
I'm going to hand it to you. But it's an important balance to see both sides of those equations. And I think that for me too. It was so interesting coming into the field and being a birth doula, and then experiences happened in my life. And I was like, oh, I'm probably not going to birth my children vaginally. It's just so interesting how our minds just change and our opinions and our judgments. And I just think that I'm kind of loving getting older. I'm about to turn 42 tomorrow. I'm like, there's like so much wisdom. And I feel like my grandma always said this to me, but like, I like getting older because it's making me a better person. It's making me look at the world in a different way. And I mean, what really bonds women and like why having mom friends is just the best thing and gold in the world is we can talk about our birth stories and how they affected us. And I think we just wanted to fill that void in the C-section space, be like, it is okay. You don't owe anybody an apology, and you don't need to apologize to yourself if your birth went very differently than you had anticipated. Because if you're here and this healthy baby is here, that was the end goal. That was the beauty in all of this.
I love that so much. And it's so funny because like I always say, one of my students labeled me as crunchy with a side of medical.
Yeah,
so I love you guys. You guys are like crunchy with a side of medical.
Yes.
And it's so funny because I am so obsessed with women knowing what's going to happen before they step foot. And I say this all the time, like when you're in labor, when you're in the hospital, your only job is to labor. Your only job is to give birth, whatever way that you're doing it. So I love that you guys are stepping outside of the labor room because that's when it has to happen. And I also have a belly birth class and a section in the regular class for scheduled C-sections. One of the most traumatic experiences I had as a labor nurse was when I was training, and I've got my preceptor with me and we go into the OR, and I had all 6 of my babies unmedicated vaginal deliveries. I was induced with 3 of them. So I had some intervention situations, but I had never been in the OR. And it was so shocking to me how little she knew. Like walking in, she had like her like deer in the headlights eyes. Now she's butt naked. We're all rushing around doing things, and no one's really guiding her. And then on top of that, I remember her spinal wasn't a great spinal. So that was a little traumatic for me as well. But I just remember the whole situation feeling like this is still her birth. And like, it didn't seem like she was really a part of it. Like no one was addressing her. And so I love that you're doing this. And I'll have to be real. I feel like in the years that I started Labor Nurse Mama in 2019, launched the birth courses in 2020, launched the podcast, I want to say in 2022, but gosh, it's kind of running together now. I don't think I've ever talked to an anesthesiologist.
See? Yeah. Oh, I love this. There's not many of us out there.
And the
publicly.
thing about with Jen is like, she's like the anesthesiologist friend that you wanted to have. And this is why we would end up in these really deep conversations. Because I thought, well, I would have never had a conversation with my anesthesiologist, but had I known, right, that anesthesiologists care in a different way. I mean, Jen cares immensely about her patients, which makes her unique too. But you're like a friend anesthesiologist.
And that makes a huge deal for the patient and the labor nurses, because we all know the anesthesiologists that are not like that.
Yes.
And
I love my nurses.
So yeah. And I have, as a part of the class with the belly birth class, I always I have them guided who to talk to who and how to talk to them and what questions to ask and who makes that decision. And a lot of times it is the anesthesiologist. And so I just love that you're doing this, because I personally feel that all women considering an epidural or having a C-section should get a consult with the anesthesiologist ahead of time.
I agree. I agree. We're not paid for them. You know, some places. So I want people to know that it's a thing, though, definitely, that an anesthesia consult is a thing. And many, many places will allow it. Usually it's for something, you know, more medically complicated. Yeah. But yeah, if you have specific concerns, I think it's so worth asking for and really pushing for it, because sometimes you can figure out a way to do it, even if it's just a phone call. Sometimes you have to come in, whatever it is. but it can really help people feel so much more comfortable, especially the situation, like you said, even if it was an epidural or spinal that previously didn't work so well. And of course, you're going to be super nervous about that again, regardless of what you're planning in the future. So to be able to talk through that, you know, why did that happen for me? And what are you going to do to avoid that in the future? And I think you can go in feeling so much more calm. And of course, we talk to patients when we consent them for anesthesia. But again, it's just, that can be, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not usually a really long 20, 30-minute conversation like it probably deserves to be.
Yeah. And I love that. And I also love the idea of, for the C-section moms, giving her the ability to talk through the different things throughout her belly birth, because that allows her to have a birth experience instead of just a surgery. So I know some of the things that I recommend to my scheduled C-sections, or if they're non-emergent and they don't have an epidural in place, to walk to the OR instead of being pushed to the OR. There's different things that I recommend inside the OR. So I'd love to hear from you guys for these moms who end up in a C-section or are scheduled C-section. How can they make it more like a birth experience instead of just a surgery? So like kind of riff on what you guys recommend.
I mean, I always say the coping skills that you are practicing before your vaginal birth should be the same coping skills you should bring in to the OR. So if it's a breathing exercise, if it's how you're talking with your partner, how you're utilizing your partner to be your support person, you can still do all of that in the OR. There's more people, there's bright lights, there's more sounds, but you can still make it an intimate experience with your partner and letting them know that a hand rub is just as important, and sometimes even more important in that setting. So setting up those same coping skills. Don't rewrite the script.
Right. How about you?
Oh, there's so many things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you experienced this in your time as a labor and delivery nurse, but I know really since I've been doing this, which is about 8 years, these things are becoming more normal, more common, where they were really not a thing, I think, when I first started. And more we're seeing that this is not just, okay, we'll do it if you ask, but a lot of places are really incorporating into their kind of standard of care when it comes to C-sections. But the thing that I'm most excited about right now is adding music to the OR.
Yeah.
We were looking it up and I just found some study about how it's just really proven to reduce anxiety, whether or not you even choose the music, if there's just music on in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So we would always ask our patients if they want it or not. But sometimes people, if they haven't prepared for that question, are like, oh, whatever, whatever you want. And I just like put it on. And then I ask them obviously what they want, and we can tailor it to their preferences. But I think that's a great thing. And particularly if it was unplanned and you had music going on, in the labor room, you can certainly move that over. We're big proponents of early skin to skin.
Yeah.
That is definitely hospital dependent, but it's something that I think we're recognizing as something that's very important for bonding, for mom, for baby. It's just, and it can be done basically. Some people feel like they didn't even really know that was a thing, but many places are doing immediate skin to skin, or at least early skin to skin. So that can certainly be accommodated for. There's certain things you have to change with, for me, the positioning of the monitors and how the drape is placed, that it's not too suffocating over mom, but it's totally can be done.
Can I interrupt you right there for just a second?
Yeah.
Because I love that you said that, because inside my belly birth course, I share with them, because I was a labor and delivery nurse for 16 years. So I saw a range of changes.
Right. Yeah.
And I worked as a travel nurse all over the country. So I saw
how different it can be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really amazing what they can do on the West Coast that literally is not possible on the East Coast.
How can one hospital say that this is in no way, never situation, and another one's doing it for every single patient? Explain that.
Yes, and it's so frustrating. But I love that you said what you said about skin to skin, because what I found with my own patients is that a lot of times it was the anesthesiologist that was fighting against it. And so in the belly birth, I'm like, that's who you need to talk to. And I tell them the same thing, because they're going to make some accommodations for that. And that is just so important for her to feel like, if I hear anything from my I have a lot of students that come in and it's not their first baby. And I also have the VBAC specific course. And so a lot of my students come in with a lot of trauma, and missing out on those moments cause a lifetime of trauma for her. And so that is so important that we have to address it, and hospitals need to get on board.
Yeah.
I agree. I feel like the more we talk about this, the more this needs to be like a crusade or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Seriously.
But I'm done saying, we'll see, or,
Yeah.
or kind of understanding the other side of it where, yes, it it messes with the workflow for the nurses too, to not blame it entirely on anesthesia, although I know we can blame most things on
Well, you
anesthesia.
do have more power in the operating room.
Yeah.
Let's just be real.
But I think like a piece of it is whatever the workflow is, and you would know, having worked at multiple different places, where this is how we assess the baby initially, and this is whether we weigh the baby in the OR or wait to weigh the baby later, when do we take the baby to the nursery. And so that's kind of the time piece of it. But then once the baby is released to the mom, whether or not the baby can be held skin to skin, the anesthesiologist really has to be supportive of that. And I try to actually help, but of course, if there is a doula or some other support person, in there that can kind of keep an eye on the safety of the baby, and having all those things set up ahead of time, like I talked about with the monitors and everything. And just knowing, I think we all need to just know that skin to skin can be interrupted, right? So if something changes with the mom or the baby, then of course, then it can be interrupted. But that even getting a little bit of it is better than nothing, right?
And having the choice, because like you said, we all know there's those moms who is uncontrollably shaking, or she's sick and she wants to end the skin to skin.
Yeah.
But having that choice of saying like, okay, can you take the baby for a moment, gives her so much more power.
For sure.
Yeah. Not everyone. Yeah, exactly. Not everyone would even want that. Like some people just need to get through, and they just want that moment afterwards, which is a whole nother thing that working, on prioritizing that in recovery. But yeah, having those options for sure is so, so important.
And I think even setting up like your support person or your partner to be like, if I can't skin to skin, you can wear a button down, have that moment with the baby too. It's important for both of you. Or once I start feeling, well, like maybe it's just first putting the baby on your cheek and then moving the baby as it feels right, and you're not so overwhelmed in that moment.
Yeah. And giving her that heads up and that permission that it may not be a huge priority in a moment, because she did just have major abdominal surgery. So like you said, having cheek to cheek or dad pulled up or partner pulled up with the baby might be enough for her in that moment.
Yeah.
And just touching the baby, sometimes I think I might be too aggressive, but because someone did that for me. And so, because I did not get skin to skin because it wasn't a thing then, honestly. But what did happen was when they brought the baby, my daughter, immediately from the surgical field over to me, whoever from the pediatrician team kind of reached out her leg, like put her leg near me and was like, touch her. And I grabbed her leg. I touched her leg. And that moment, and then I held her afterwards, swaddled. But I remember the feeling of touching her skin.
Yeah.
But, to
It's
this
almost-
day.
it's making me tear up a little, because how many women have had a C-section that didn't even get to touch their baby?
Right.
Like,
You can
over
touch
the
them for
course
1
of my
second.
career,
Yeah.
they would come up and they would show the baby, and we're going to take baby and your partner, and we're going to leave now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You're left to cope with yourself.
Yeah. And the sad part about that is, I'm very brutally honest, is that in the beginning of my career, I didn't think otherwise, like, because that was just how I was trained and that was normal.
Same.
Yeah. And so there's so many things I've had to check myself since I came out of the labor room and onto this side, and spending so much time with these moms, especially my postpartum moms in our membership. And for those of you guys listening, I have a terrible cold, so my voice sounds really bad, but such an important conversation. But I have had moments where I'm like, holy hell, Trish, like, you've said that. You've done that.
It's hard.
But
It's
in
hard
my-
to
it
realize
is.
that. Yeah.
It is. And thankfully, I started doing travel nursing about 3 years in. that is what changed everything for me, because I was like, wait a minute. A woman can eat in labor in California, but Tennessee women, something's different about their bodies because they'll die if they eat in labor. Like, what is going on? But I also realized that just because I was trained, and I tell my students this all the time, it's a job for us. And just like any job, you get set in your ways and like you find your rhythm and you find your way. But it's up to these patients too to bump into that rhythm and be like, yeah, I understand that's how you do it, but we're not doing that this time. This is going to be different.
I mean, I think that's what's so important for us too, is the advocating piece is essential for how you're going to ultimately come out of it. And probably because neither of us got skin to skin in the OR, it like, the proper skin to skin, it like pushes us to be like, no, ask for it. Because I can't even look friendly back at my pictures without getting upset and crying a little bit that was like a loss.
And what are their ages?
4, 6, and 8.
I want, like, my mom is in her 80s. This chokes me up so much. I think I'm just sick and haven't had sleep, so I'm very emotional right now.
We're emotional all the time.
Same page, yeah.
But my mom had a baby die after birth, my sister before me. And back then, she didn't even get to see her. That was her first C-section. The rest of my siblings, I'm baby number 7. The rest of her vaginal deliveries, and Michelle was born. My mother never got to see her, touch her, hold her, nothing. That was it. And then when I was born, she didn't get that either. And imagine she's lost a baby who was alive when she's born. She did have like a serious issue back then. They didn't have what we have now to know that. Now they would have had a team and she probably would have lived. But then she has another baby and they whisk me off. My mom is 83. And when she talks about those experiences, it's still so much pain.
I mean, it's burned into your soul how you are treated in one of the most vulnerable moments of your life. And that's why it matters. And that's why it matters for us all to be talking about it and to be encouraging patients. Like, maybe we didn't have this, but like, you have a voice and you have to use it. And something that you said in one of your podcasts is how you have to be knowledgeable in order to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
So if you don't have all these pieces together, if you don't seek out this information, what are you even advocating for?
Yeah, because, and this is what I say all the time, I have my certain mantras and I repeat them all the time. So they're burned in the brain. But if you don't know your birth options, you don't have any. So I'm all about hypnobirthing and I'm all about Lamaze and all of those things. But what I love about my classes is that they know everything I know. And then I give them all the tools and all of that, because the breathing tools and the movements and all of those things are not going to work for you if a doctor walks in and scares the bejesus out of you because you don't know that what he's saying is bullshit. And that's what, and I'm getting fired up again because I feel like what has really hit me here in 2025 is how women in all other areas were like, we have rights and this is our body and all this. But then they step into their OB's office or the labor room and they just lay that all down and just, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And that has to stop for all of our children.
Yeah. I mean, I have never strapped a patient's arms down. I have never seen a patient. I think I maybe once walked in on one.
Wait, you mean they don't have to be strapped down?
One time I walked into a room and it was maybe someone who was less experienced started strapping the arms and I like very quickly stopped them. But otherwise, I didn't even really think of it as a problem because no one did it. I would never do it. And then when you hear that for some women, they're told like, oh no, absolutely, you have to do this. Well, that's a perfect example of something where pushing back, if you can feel really confident in yourself, like, no, I know, I heard that 100% this does not have to be done. I think that gives you the confidence and the strength to say, this is not acceptable to me. Mm-hmm.
And you can chart that I'm refusing.
Right. Yeah. I'm refusing my restraints. That's what I say. Use the word restraints. That'll get him.
Yeah. And if you think about that, like this all goes back to that first C-section that I saw, because I will tell you that the majority of the hospitals I was in, they strapped at least one arm down. And here you have her, maybe she's been laboring, maybe she wasn't planning the C-section. More than likely, no matter what path, she has not been educated, because there really isn't a lot of education prior to walking into the OR. And she's like, her nervous system is up and she's going to have her baby. And like, I can't wait to have my baby. Maybe she's never been a hospital patient. She's numb, which I've never been numb because I've never had epidural.
It's very weird.
But I have seen some patients lose their shit
Yeah.
when just from the numbness. So now she's numb. She can't feel from under her breast down. And now her arms are strapped down.
Right.
It is the most bizarre experience.
Barbaric.
And it's the only surgery pretty much, especially one this extensive, that we do with the patient awake, because why would we, except for that this patient wants to be awake to experience their birth. But otherwise, it would be crazy to think, that we would keep someone awake for something like this.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that we can do it.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we can do it, but it's a lot. And these little things that, like you said, when you've been doing things the same way for 20 years or whatever it is, and someone told you this is how we do it, and you've never questioned it, when we are undoing some of these things, it can make a huge difference for these women. So how to make a C-section more of an experience.
Yeah.
The C-section experience.
Which is still a birth experience.
It's still a birth.
Definitely.
It also happens to be a surgery, but it's a birth, and there are so many things that we can do. Let's think of other things.
I have a couple.
Sure.
What I address in the belly birth class is talking to the anesthesiologist about the types of medication, because you don't want to be drowsy.
Oh, okay. Want me to go off on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that, because I see, of course not me, but I know of kind of two sides of the coin there.
Oh, I know them too.
Yes, right? So there's the one where people are getting medications. I had 0 sedative medications during my C-section. I was completely awake. And there are people who will get sedative, whether it's a benzo or IV pain medication. You don't need any of that if your spinal is working properly. And so they are sedated and they don't know what they got and they don't know when or why, and just completely.
And they feel loopy and it's blurry what happened.
Right. And then there's the other side of the coin where, when it comes to anxiety, primarily, we shouldn't, the spinal or epidural should take care of the pain. So there really should be no reason for IV pain medications if everything went well. But where someone will request medication for anxiety and they'll be told that they can't get it. And that's also not true, basically. But knowing that you should be in control of what medications you give, and that should always be a conversation, whichever direction you're interested in going, and explaining the risks and benefits of those medications before you have them, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Another thing that I recommend to my students, and this came from a VBAC lab student, she had a nurse take a picture of them pulling the baby out of her. And that was her baby number. Oh gosh, she's had 2 babies. I think that was baby number 2. And I added that into the belly birth masterclass because she said that something in her brain clicked, and it was like, yeah, that baby did come out of me. And so now I recommend that to all of my students. Do you guys feel like that would have been an option for you in your deliveries? And do you feel like there's some people in the room who would say no to that?
Neither of us had that.
Yeah.
I definitely could have, because I was working with all my coworkers. I had my baby with all my coworkers, and someone would have did that for me for sure.
Yeah. Did you guys ever think about that?
I didn't.
For it.
I wish I would have asked about the clear drape, because I would have found it so fascinating to, I wanted them to tell me everything that was going on during my surgery so I could feel a part of it. But because I love birth and I love science, I think it would have been so fascinating to see it. And actually, someone was saying they wanted to see their placenta. Yes, it's bringing the whole picture together. These are all the parts of what I've done to create this human. So I always ask my patients, do you want to see your placenta? Because I am the same way. I'm such a birth geek. And it's just so fascinating. I love showing in the amniotic sac and all of that.
I never even thought about the fact that the C-section patients, and I probably did put that in the belly birth, but it's been a few years.
Add it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never even thought about the fact that you guys don't get to see that. But I feel like it's such a valuable. Now, here's the thing about the picture. There are people who could not have a clear drape, who could not watch it,
100%.
but they could look at the picture afterwards.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you can always, although I did not get a picture, I take pictures for people all the time and I ask them how graphic they want them to be. Or I say, this is a cool picture. Just delete it if you don't want it, or maybe have someone else take a look.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would have liked to have more pictures. We've talked about videos before and how, that is also a thing that can be done. But the main, I guess, reason I would say is videoing people without their consent is problematic, which I understand. So
Especially now.
Right.
Oh, gosh,
I mean,
yeah.
I've had some really terrible pictures posted. And I'm like, oh, because, even I have a birth picture of Grayson and my labor nurse is behind me and she's going, and I have it. It's like one of my favorite pictures of me and Grayson, but that was, that was 10 years ago. People weren't tagging you like they do now.
Right.
Yeah.
But goodness, yeah.
But I think that's something that if it was really important to you, let's say, aside from, I think anywhere should allow pictures of the baby or whatever, you're holding the baby afterwards. But if you wanted more detailed, amazing birth photography or videography, I think that's definitely, it's not illegal, is all I'm saying. It's not going to affect the surgery. Yeah. So that would be a discussion I think you could have. And depending on who's in the OR with you, which I agree, knowing who is in there is really important and what their rules are. It's something that could be done. And I personally would want that.
Yeah.
If I did it again.
You're only going to do it. You're going to have that moment once to capture it all. So yeah, if you're just clicking away, who cares if you delete half of them? You're keeping that journal.
Here's what's funny though. I had a VBAC and granted it was in 2020, right? So I don't know,
not
who knows
the best
where
time.
my brain was. I would think I had to wear a mask during most of my labor. But anyway, but I don't have any pictures from that either, which is, disappointing. But
the majority of my babies were in the 90s. I don't have much for that either.
Right, because we just didn't take pictures of absolutely everything all the time. Right?
No. Well, you didn't have a camera in your hand.
Right.
It was big and bulky.
World. Can you
imagine?
And
then you had to actually take it to CVS or Walgreens and get it printed and then remember to pick it up and all of that. So
no, our kids they're going to be able to walk into an AI universe and re-see their whole birth.
Their whole birth.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. No, there's a lot different for them. Yeah, I love that. So is there anything else that you guys feel is really important that over the course of having the C-section experience that maybe you were a guest or a mom or someone brought to you that was just one of those aha moments?
I think it always makes me feel sad when people feel like they can't talk about it ahead of time if they have a scheduled one, or that when they are talking about it, they're giving you the rationale for why they had it. And I feel like just normalizing that you birthed a baby by C-section, okay, but you still birthed that baby, and to just really make that a normal statement versus a pause. Let me think, how do I further explain this? I think it would add less trauma to the experience for women as well, if they felt proud of it. I feel proud that I birthed my children this way because it was safest for them and for me. So how could I not be proud of that process?
Well, and let's just face the fact that you had a major abdominal surgery and then had to go home and take care of a human. That is, we all know
that's Wonder Woman shit.
Yeah. There's no other surgery that you are sent home with instructions to care for someone else.
True.
No. Yeah. I feel like recovery is a whole beast in and of itself.
Yeah.
And we do talk about that as well. But I think if we can really improve the actual birth experience, a lot of these things will carry into recovery.
Yeah.
If we're going in with less anxiety, feeling really good about the choice, meaning you know why, if you want it you feel good about it. If you didn't want it, you really understand deeply that your provider is making the choices that are right for you, that this is the way that it should be happening, and you understand all the things leading up to it. And then that you can still bring in whatever those things that you were hoping for, that if it was doing the early skin to skin, or having dad cut the umbilical cord, or having the partner announce the gender, or whatever special thing that you can add to the experience, and having a really supportive group of people around you who are cheering you on and saying happy birthday when the baby is born, that it can be really nice. Even in scarier situations, we can turn it around and make it really nice. And I think that really ultimately is going to improve how the mom is processing the birth, how recovery is going. And so I guess I want people to know that if you had a less than positive experience the first time around, and if you're planning a C-section, that there are lots of things that you can do to mentally prepare yourself, questions that you can ask of your providers, and ways that you can go in feeling really confident that you're going to have a better birth experience that aligns with you and your wishes.
I love that. And I think that's such a beautiful place to end this chat, because that is the most important part, is that she has so much more power than she thinks that she has. So tell everybody where we can find you guys.
Listen to our podcast.
Yes.
If you want to hear really
a lot of deep dives,
detailed information about any possible thing related to C-sections, you can listen to the C-section Experience podcast.
And they can find that everywhere.
You can find that, all the
Apple,
usual
Spotify.
Places. And then we have our Instagram and TikTok too, which we have little clips and little educational pieces that we put up, which is at the CSX podcast.
And the last thing that we did is we created a pair of socks that are hospital cute heart socks with a mantra on the toe that say, I got this, because we all need a mantra when we're going through the process.
Yeah.
And we feel like your feet and you should be hugged all over. So it's our little love gift to wear some cute socks in the hospital.
Awesome. And I'll link to everything in the show notes. And I look forward to coming onto your podcast and continuing this conversation. I hope you loved this episode. Tag us in your stories or share it with a friend planning a C-section. Write a review, subscribe, and as always, I'll see you again next Friday. Bye for now.